listed me as the estate co-sponsor on the family reunion flyers before they even asked if I was coming. I found out from my cousin, who texted me a photo of the printed flyer with a laughing emoji, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. That was 3 months after my grandmother passed. 3 months after I found out she had left me $180,000. I hadn't told anyone. Or so I thought. My grandmother's name was Opal. She was the kind of woman who kept cash in a coffee can behind her flour canister and didn't trust banks until she was 67. She had outlived 2 husbands, a house fire in 1987, and every single doctor who had ever told her to cut back on butter. She made it to 89 on stubbornness and sweet tea, and when she went quietly in her own bed, the way she always said she wanted. She left me the money because, as her attorney read from the letter she had prepared, I was the one who showed up. Not in a dramatic way, just in the regular way. I drove her to her cardiology appointments in Memphis when my mother said she was too busy. I called every Sunday. I sat with her during the long, boring stretches of her last hospitalization, when everyone else had somewhere more important to be. I didn't do any of it expecting anything. Opal and I just got along. She thought most of the family was exhausting, and honestly, so did I. She left smaller amounts to my mother and my aunt. She left her house to be sold and split between them. She left me the $180,000 separately, through trust, with a note that said, "Don't let them make you feel guilty about this." I knew what I was doing. I read that line 4 times in the attorney's office. I should have listened to it harder. The first mistake I made was telling my mother the number. I didn't have to. The distributions were private. But she asked me directly, sitting across from me at the attorney's office after everything was read, with this look on her face like she was owed an answer. My mother has a way of asking questions that doesn't leave room for "I'd rather not say." I've never fully learned how to resist it. So I told her. She nodded slowly. She said, "Opal always did have a soft spot for you." The way she said it didn't sound like a compliment. Within 2 weeks, my brother called. My brother is 38. He runs a landscaping company that has been about to take off for approximately 6 years. He's not a bad person. He's just the kind of person who has spent his whole life believing that one big break is the only thing standing between him and the life he deserves. He's also married to a woman named, well, I'll just call her my sister-in-law, who has expensive taste and a talent for reframing other people's money as a shared resource. He said he needed $75,000. He said it like he was asking to borrow my phone charger. "It's not a gift," he said quickly. "It's an investment. You'd be a silent partner. The business just needs one good push, and it'll be self-sustaining. You'd make your money back in 3 years, easy." I asked him if he had a business plan I could look at. He said he'd been meaning to put one together. I said I'd think about it. That was the wrong answer. "I'll think about it" is a door left open. I should have closed it. My mother called the next day. She didn't mention the money directly at first. She asked how I was doing, how work was going, whether I'd been eating enough. Then, after about 12 minutes of this, she said, "Your brother really is trying his best, you know. He has a family to think about. I have a family to think about too," I thought. "Me, I'm my own family." I said I understood. She said, "I just think Opal would have wanted the money to help everyone." I sat with that for a second. Then I said, "Opal actually wrote a letter saying the opposite." My mother said, "Well, she wasn't always thinking clearly toward the end." Opal had been sharp as a tack until the last 3 weeks of her life, and my mother knew it. I didn't say that. I just said I had to go. I want to be honest about something. I considered it. Not the full $75,000, that was never going to happen, but something. A smaller amount. A loan. Because when you grow up in a family where keeping the peace is treated like a survival skill, that instinct doesn't disappear just because you're 31 and living 4 hours away and technically have your own life. I sat in my apartment and did the math in my head about what I could give without feeling it too much, and the fact that I was even doing that math should have told me everything. Then the flyer thing happened. The family holds the reunion every 2 years. It's usually low-key. A pavilion rent or a state park, a potluck, lawn chairs, the same argument about whether to do a raffle. This year, my aunt had decided to upgrade it. She wanted to rent a proper venue. She wanted catered food. She was calling it a celebration of Opal's legacy, which I will say is a creative way to describe spending a lot of money on yourself. My cousin sent me the flyer photo on a Tuesday morning. I was at work eating a sad desk lunch and I opened the message and saw my name listed under presenting sponsors alongside 2 local businesses that had apparently donated money. I had donated nothing. I had been asked nothing. I called my aunt. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding bright and unbothered. "Oh good, I was going to call you. Doesn't it look nice?" I said. "You listed me as a sponsor without asking me." She said, "Well, we just assumed. With the inheritance and everything, you'd want to contribute." "It's for the family, honey. It's for Opal." I said, "How much are you expecting me to contribute?" She paused. "We thought maybe $15,000 would be appropriate for everything. $15,000 for a family reunion that my grandmother, who kept cash in a coffee can, would have found completely insane." I said I didn't agree to that. My aunt's voice changed just slightly. Not angry. Worse than angry, patient. "I understand money can feel complicated, but I want you to think about how this looks. You got the lion's share of what Opal left. The rest of us are just trying to honor her memory. It would be a shame for you to be the one who made that difficult. It would be a shame for me to be the one who made that difficult." I told her I needed to think about it. I hung up. I sat there for a minute looking at my sad desk lunch and then I threw it away because I had completely lost my appetite. Within 48 hours, I had heard from 4 more people. My mother called again. She said my aunt was upset and that I needed to meet them halfway. My sister-in-law texted me a long message about how family was everything and how Opal's spirit would want us all to be generous. She signed it with a heart emoji. She had met Opal exactly 3 times. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years messaged me on social media to say she thought I was being a little cold. And my brother came by my apartment, drove 4 hours without warning, just showed up and sat on my couch and said, "I need you to understand how much pressure I'm under right now." He looked tired. He genuinely looked tired, and for a second I felt so much tenderness for him that it almost worked. Then he said, "The business stuff aside, you could at least help with the reunion. It's not like you need the money for anything specific. You're single. You don't have a mortgage. What exactly are you saving it for?" And there it was. "You're single. You don't have a mortgage. What exactly are you saving it for?" "I'm saving it for my future. I'm saving it because I'm a 31-year-old woman with a job that doesn't have a pension, a body that will eventually need medical care, a world that does not hand single women security for free. I'm saving it because my grandmother spent 89 years watching women in this family hand everything they had to everyone around them and die with nothing left, and she specifically, deliberately, legally decided she didn't want that for me." I said, "I think you should go." He looked surprised. In 26 years of being my brother, I had never said that to him. I had never asked him to leave. I had always found a way to smooth it over. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "I'll call you later." He left. He didn't call me. I didn't call him either. The next week was one of the strangest of my life. Not dramatic, just quiet in a way that felt enormous. No one from my family reached out except my mother, who sent 2 texts. The first said, "I hope you know what you're doing." The second, 2 days later, said, "Your grandmother would be disappointed." I read that second one maybe 15 times. I kept waiting to feel something, guilt probably, or at least some version of it. My grandmother would be disappointed. The woman who had written me a letter that said, "Don't let them make you feel guilty about this." I thought about calling my mother back. I thought about explaining again that I wasn't being cruel, that I wasn't punishing anyone, that I simply wasn't going to give money I had legally and rightfully inherited to people who had decided I owed it to them without asking me first. I didn't call. I put my phone in the kitchen and went for a long walk instead. I need to tell you about the church thing because it escalated in a way I didn't see coming. My family attends a church in their hometown. A mid-sized congregation, everyone knows everyone kind of place, the kind where people take enormous interest in each other's business under the umbrella of community. My mother had apparently mentioned the situation to someone, or my aunt had, or both. I'm still not entirely sure, and word had gotten around that I had inherited a fortune and was refusing to help the family. I know this because one of Opal's oldest friends, a woman I've known my whole life, called me. She wasn't unkind about it. She was just checking in, she said. She just wanted to make sure I was okay, she said. And then, toward the end, she said gently that she had heard there was some tension and that sometimes when we lose someone it brings up difficult feelings about money and she hoped I would pray on it. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. This was the moment I understood that it wasn't going to stop. That there was no version of this where I explained myself well enough and everyone nodded and backed off. That the narrative had already been written. I was the ungrateful one, the cold one, the one who had gotten too much and was hoarding it. And no amount of patient phone calls was going to rewrite it. I was not going to win this by engaging with it. Here is what I did. I called my attorney, the same one who had handled Opal's estate, and I asked him to send a formal letter to my mother, my aunt, and my brother stating that any further communication regarding the inheritance should go through him, and that I would not be making any distributions to family members. I'm not going to pretend that felt good. It felt like something breaking. But it also felt underneath that, like something stopping. Some long-running machinery finally going quiet. Then I updated my contact settings, not a dramatic block, just I moved them to a category where their calls went to voicemail. Their texts came in, but I decided when I was ready to read them. I stopped being available on their schedule. I did not go to the family reunion. I did not send $15,000. I did not invest in my brother's business. A few weeks later, I did something I'd been thinking about since the attorney's office. I made an appointment with a financial advisor. A real one, fee only, no commissions. I sat across from her and I spread out everything, what Opal had left me, what I had in savings, what I was making, what I owed. And we talked for 2 hours about what a financially stable future actually looked like for a single woman in her early 30s, with no one else to fall back on. She helped me put $60,000 into a high-yield account as an emergency fund. We set up a Roth IRA and maxed it out for the year. She helped me think through whether buying a condo made sense in my city right now. It didn't quite yet, but in 18 months maybe. The rest went into a brokerage account, invested conservatively, growing slowly. None of it was flashy. None of it would have made a good story at a family reunion. But I thought about Opal in her house, with her coffee can and her flour canister, putting away what she could, quietly, over decades for exactly this, for me, for this conversation, with this advisor, for this moment. I think I made her proud. My brother texted me about 6 weeks after he had come to my apartment. Not about money, just a photo of his dog doing something goofy with a one-line caption. No mention of anything else. I looked at it for a while. Then I sent back a laughing emoji. That's where we are. It's not resolved. It's not a clean ending where everyone apologized and understood and we all cried and hugged. My mother and I are in a careful, quiet standoff that might last years. My aunt never removed my name from the sponsor line on some version of the flyer that I'm sure is still floating around somewhere. My sister-in-law unfollowed me on everything, which honestly was its own kind of relief. But here is what I know. Opal spent decades in this family watching what happened when a woman didn't protect what was hers. She watched women defer and minimize and give until there was nothing left to give, and then she watched them be thanked for it, with nothing but more expectations. She saw all of that clearly, and she decided she wasn't going to let it happen to me if she could help it. She left me money. She also left me a letter, and the letter, I think, was the more important thing. Don't let them make you feel guilty about this. I knew what I was doing. I'm trying Opal. I really am. Some mornings I open my banking app and I look at the numbers. Not obsessively, just the way you check that something fragile is still in one piece. And I think about how long it takes to build something and how fast it can be pulled apart if you let it. I think about being 60 years old and not having to ask anyone for anything. I think about what it means to be a woman who is nobody's financial solution. I'm not there yet, but I'm building it. Quietly, carefully. The way she taught me. And nobody's name is going on my flyers. I thought a lot about why it went the way it went, not obsessively, just the way you turn something over in your hands after it's finally cooled down enough to hold. What happened wasn't random. Every person in this story made choices, and those choices had weight. My brother chose to show up at my door unannounced and say out loud that my future mattered less than his because I didn't have children. My aunt chose to print my name on a flyer and call it an assumption. My mother chose to tell a congregation full of people that I was being difficult, rather than pick up the phone and talk to me like a daughter. And I, for a long time, chose to stay soft when I should have been clear. That last one is the part I've had to sit with the hardest. There's a version of me that would have written a check just to make the noise stop. I know that version well. She's been around my whole life. The one who apologizes first, who finds a way to absorb things, who tells herself that keeping the peace is the same as having peace. It isn't. I understand that now in a way I only have understood before. Keeping the peace just means you're the one doing all the holding. Eventually you get tired. Eventually something has to give. What Opal understood, what she had watched unfold across decades of this family, is that generosity without boundaries doesn't produce gratitude. It produces expectation. She had seen women in our family give and get treated like they hadn't given enough, every single time. She saw the pattern clearly enough that she wrote it down in a letter, and had an attorney read it in a room full of people. She wasn't being cruel when she did that. She was being precise. I think about Derek genuinely. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's a person who got very good at believing his own story. The one where the break is always just around the corner, where someone else's resources are a reasonable part of the plan. That kind of thinking doesn't come from nowhere. It gets built slowly, by a lifetime of people who loved him, finding ways to make things work so he didn't have to. I was not willing to be the next one. Not because I don't care about him, but because I do. And because that pattern was never going to help him build anything real. The intelligence it took me a long time to develop wasn't book intelligence. It was the quieter kind, knowing when a conversation is actually a negotiation you never agreed to enter. Knowing that explaining yourself to people who have already decided your explanation is wrong is not a path to resolution, it's just a longer version of losing. Knowing when to stop performing reasonableness for an audience that isn't watching in good faith. The grit wasn't dramatic either. It wasn't a confrontation or a speech, it was just continuing. Making the appointment. Sitting across from the financial advisor, looking at the numbers and making a plan and not letting the noise outside dictate the decisions inside. Doing it again the next week and the one after that. Opal built her security in small, unglamorous increments over a lifetime. A coffee can. A flour canister. Decades of quiet, careful choices. She left me more than money. She left me a model for how a woman takes care of herself in a world that would rather she didn't. I'm not finished building, but I'm building, and the foundation is mine.